David Martinez stood in the busy courthouse hallway, organizing papers in his worn leather briefcase. At 42, he had worked as a family attorney for 15 years. His dark blue suit had small coffee stains near the cuff, evidence of his rushed morning. The courthouse always felt the same, a mix of tension, sadness, and occasionally, relief. It was Tuesday afternoon, and David was tired. He had just finished a difficult custody case that left him emotionally drained. He glanced at his watch. 3:45 p.m. One more meeting with a client at 4:30, then he could go home. The hallway buzzed with conversations as people moved quickly between courtrooms. That's when he noticed the boy. Small for his age, maybe 7 or 8 years old, the child ran through the crowd. People turned to look as he passed. His face was red and wet with tears, his small chest heaving with sobs. David watched with mild curiosity, assuming the boy was running to his parent. But the child was running straight toward him. Before David could react, the boy crashed into his legs, small hands clutching desperately at his suit jacket. When David looked down, he saw wide, frightened eyes staring up at him. "Please don't let go," the boy whispered between sobs. David felt his heart drop like a stone. Something in those 4 simple words, the raw fear, the desperate hope, hit him hard. He knelt down, putting his briefcase on the floor. "Hey there," he said gently. "I'm David. What's your name?" "Tyler," the boy managed, still holding tight to David's jacket as if afraid he might disappear. "Tyler, where are your parents?" David asked, scanning the hallway. He expected to see a frantic adult searching for their child. Instead, Tyler's grip tightened. "Please," he repeated. "Don't let them take me back." Security officer Maria Gonzalez approached them. She had worked at the courthouse for 20 years and knew David well. "Everything okay here, counselor?" she asked, concern in her eyes. "I'm not sure," David replied honestly. He turned back to the boy. "Tyler, can you tell me why you're scared?" Tyler's small shoulders shook. "He hurts me when no one's looking," he whispered. "Nobody believes me." Maria and David exchanged a quick glance. David felt a familiar knot form in his stomach, the one that appeared whenever he encountered a child in danger. "Who hurts you, Tyler?" David asked, keeping his voice calm despite the alarm rising inside him. "My dad," Tyler whispered. "I'm supposed to go home with him today after court." Just then, a loud voice called out from down the hallway. "Tyler, get over here now." The boy flinched violently, his whole body tensing with fear. David looked up to see a well-dressed man pushing through the crowd, his face flushed with anger. "Is that your father?" David asked quietly. Tyler nodded, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. In that moment, David made a decision. He stood up, keeping one hand gently on Tyler's shoulder. Years of legal training and experience told him to proceed carefully, but every human instinct screamed that this child needed protection. "Maria," he said to the security officer, "could you please call Judge Williams's clerk? Tell her we need an emergency hearing, and contact Child Protective Services immediately." As Tyler's father approached, David felt the boy press against his side, trembling. David looked down at those frightened eyes that had somehow found him in a crowded hallway and made a silent promise. He wouldn't let go. Tyler's father stopped a few feet away, his angry expression shifting to a polished smile when he noticed Maria's security uniform. David recognized the change immediately. He had seen it countless times in his career. The public face versus the private reality. "There you are, son," the man said, his voice suddenly gentle. "You can't run off like that." He looked at David with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry if he bothered you. Tyler has an active imagination." David kept his hand firmly on Tyler's shoulder. "I'm David Martinez, family attorney," he said, keeping his tone professional. "And you are?" "James Wilson," the man replied, extending his hand. David noticed a heavy gold watch and perfectly manicured nails. "Tyler's father, we just finished our custody hearing upstairs." David shook his hand briefly. "Mr. Wilson, your son seems very upset." James sighed dramatically. "His mother fills his head with stories. The judge just awarded me primary custody, which is clearly upsetting him. They'll adjust." Maria returned and gave David a small nod, confirming she had made the calls. Tyler remained pressed against David's side, his small body still trembling. "Mr. Wilson," David said carefully, "I believe we should talk privately about some concerns Tyler has shared." James's friendly expression hardened. "I have full custody as of 20 minutes ago. Whatever he told you is irrelevant." He reached for Tyler. "Come on, son. We're going home." Tyler flinched away. "No." The single word echoed in the hallway, drawing attention from passersby. An older woman in a dark robe appeared at the edge of the gathering crowd. Judge Sandra Williams had been handling family court cases for over 20 years. Her presence commanded immediate respect. "What's happening here, Maria?" she asked quietly. Maria had explained the situation in hushed tones, while David kept his attention on Tyler and James. The tension between father and son was palpable. "Mr. Wilson," Judge Williams said, "I'd like to speak with you and the attorney in my chambers. Officer Gonzalez will stay with Tyler for a moment." In the judge's chambers, David listened as James explained how his ex-wife had drug problems and how Tyler was simply confused by the custody change. His story was smooth, practiced. When James finished, David spoke. "Your Honor, when Tyler ran to me, he said his father hurts him when no one is looking." His exact words. He was terrified. Judge Williams turned to James. "Mr. Wilson, these are serious allegations." James laughed dismissively. "My ex-wife has been coaching him for months. The court already decided she's unfit. Ask my attorney or the child services investigator who visited our home." David felt something wasn't right. "Your Honor, could we verify which CPS worker handled this case?" A quick phone call revealed a troubling fact. The assigned investigator had taken medical leave 2 months ago. The home visit report in Tyler's file had been submitted after the investigator's leave began. Judge Williams's expression darkened. "Mr. Wilson, it appears there are some inconsistencies we need to address. I'm ordering an emergency hold on the custody ruling pending further investigation." James's face reddened. "This is ridiculous. You can't just—" "I can and I am," Judge Williams interrupted firmly. "Tyler will be placed in temporary protective custody until we sort this out." When they returned to the hallway, David saw Tyler sitting with Maria. The boy had stopped crying, though his eyes were still red. "What happens now?" Tyler asked in a small voice when David approached. David knelt down to meet Tyler's eyes. "You're going to stay somewhere safe while we figure things out. I promise I'll help you." For the first time, Tyler's face showed a glimmer of hope. Behind them, James Wilson stormed away, already dialing his attorney on his phone. David watched him go, wondering what other secrets might be hidden in Tyler's troubled past. The emergency children's shelter was a small building with bright murals painted on the walls. Tyler sat quietly on a blue plastic chair, his small backpack at his feet. It contained all they had allowed him to take from his father's house: some clothes, a worn teddy bear, and a photo of his mother. David paced the hallway outside, phone pressed to his ear. It was already 7:30 p.m., but he wasn't going home anytime soon. His wife had been understanding when he called to explain. "Do what you need to do," she had said. "That poor child." "I need everything you have on James Wilson," David said into the phone. He was talking to Sarah Chen, a paralegal he often worked with. "Court records, employment history, previous addresses, everything." "This isn't your case, David," Sarah reminded him gently. "You were just in the right place at the right time." "That boy found me for a reason," David replied, glancing through the window at Tyler. "I can't walk away now." After hanging up, David approached Ms. Rivera, the social worker assigned to Tyler's case. She looked exhausted, her curly hair pulled back in a messy bun. "How is he?" David asked. "Quiet," she replied. "Too quiet for a child who's just been taken from his home. That worries me." David nodded. "Have you reached his mother?" "Lisa Wilson is in a rehabilitation facility in Springfield. Has been for the past 3 months." Ms. Rivera checked her notes. "She lost custody 6 months ago due to substance abuse." "Can I speak with Tyler?" David asked. Inside the room, David sat across from Tyler. The boy looked smaller somehow, lost in a sweatshirt that was too big for him. "How are you doing, buddy?" David asked gently. Tyler shrugged. "Is my dad coming to get me?" "Not right now," David said carefully. "Tyler, can you tell me more about what happens at home? It would really help." Tyler stared at his shoes. "Dad says I'm not supposed to tell. It's okay to tell the truth?" David assured him. No one will be angry at you. Slowly, Tyler began to talk. He described being left alone for days while his father traveled for work, how he had to make his own meals, how his father would get angry if Tyler mentioned his mother or if he cried. And the hurting? David asked softly. Tyler rolled up his sleeve. A large bruise, yellowing at the edges, covered his upper arm. I dropped a glass, he whispered. Dad said I was careless, like my mom. David felt a surge of anger but kept his face calm. Has a doctor ever seen these bruises? Tyler shook his head. Dad says doctors ask too many questions. By 10 p.m., David had a clearer picture. Working with Ms. Rivera, he compiled a case file documenting Tyler's statements. A pediatrician had been called in to examine Tyler, photographing and documenting the bruises on his arms, back, and legs. David's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. She had found something important. James Wilson had lived in 3 different states in the past 5 years. In each location, there were records of child welfare investigations that were suddenly dropped or closed without resolution. He moves when people start asking questions, David told Ms. Rivera, showing her the information. We need to find out if there were other children involved, she said, her expression grim. At midnight, David finally left the shelter. Tyler was asleep in a small room with dinosaur posters on the walls. The boy had asked David 3 times if he would come back tomorrow. I promise, David had said each time. As he drove home, David thought about the 4 words that had started all this. Please don't let go. You wouldn't. The temporary protective order would keep Tyler safe for now, but tomorrow would bring new challenges. James Wilson would fight back, and he clearly knew how to work the system. David was prepared to fight harder. Morning light filtered through the blinds of David's office as he spread documents across his desk. He had arrived at 6 a.m., 3 hours before his first scheduled client. Dark circles under his eyes revealed his restless night, but determination kept him focused. Sarah entered with 2 coffee cups, placing one beside him. You look terrible, she said bluntly. Thanks, David replied with a tired smile. Did you find anything else? Sarah nodded, pulling up a chair. James Wilson changed his name 7 years ago. He was originally James Wilcox. She placed a folder on the desk. I found 3 domestic violence complaints filed by his ex-wife before Tyler was born, all suddenly withdrawn. David opened the folder, scanning the police reports. Classic pattern of control and intimidation. His office phone rang. It was Ms. Rivera from Social Services. David, we have a problem, she said, her voice tense. James Wilson is here with his attorney and a court order. He's demanding we release Tyler to him immediately. David stood up, grabbing his jacket. Stall them. I'm on my way. At the Children's Services building, David found Tyler sitting in a corner, hugging his knees. James Wilson stood nearby with a slick-looking attorney in an expensive suit. Their voices carried down the hallway. This is outrageous, James was saying. I have legal custody. One dramatic scene in a courthouse doesn't change that. David approached Tyler first, kneeling down to his level. Hey buddy, how are you this morning? Tyler's eyes were wide with fear. They said I have to go with him, he whispered. Not if I can help it, David promised quietly. He stood and faced James and his attorney. Martinez? James' attorney nodded coolly. This doesn't involve you. We have a valid court order. David remained calm. Based on incomplete information, Mr. Prescott, I've filed an emergency petition with evidence of abuse. Judge Williams has agreed to hear it at 11 a.m. James's face flushed with anger. More delays? This is ridiculous. Mr. Wilson, David said evenly, or should I say Mr. Wilcox? We found some interesting history in Arizona and Nevada. James went pale. His attorney looked at him sharply. What is he talking about, James? Before anyone could respond, the building's front door opened. A woman with shoulder-length brown hair entered, her steps hesitant. Tyler saw her and jumped up. Mom, he cried, running to her. Lisa Wilson knelt down, embracing her son. She looked thin but healthy, her eyes clear. I'm sorry I'm late, she said to Ms. Rivera. The bus from Springfield was delayed. James stepped forward. What is she doing here? She has no right. I invited her, Ms. Rivera explained. As Tyler's mother, she's entitled to be present at any hearings regarding his welfare, even without custody rights. The tension in the room shifted. Lisa stood up, keeping Tyler close to her side. She faced her ex-husband without flinching. "I've been sober for 90 days, she said steadily, "and I've been documenting everything you've done since the divorce." David noticed something in her hand, a small notebook with worn edges. "What's that?" he asked quietly. "Dates, times, injuries," Lisa explained. "I knew no one would believe me over him. He's too charming, too convincing. So I started writing everything down. When Tyler would call me crying, when he'd have accidents right after James got angry, I have 3 years of notes." James lunged forward suddenly. "Give me that," he shouted, grabbing for the notebook. Officer Maria Gonzalez, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped in quickly. "Sir, step back right now." The room froze. In that moment of tension, Tyler spoke up, his voice surprisingly strong. "There's more," he said, "in Dad's office closet behind the golf clubs. A box with videos." "Shut up," James shouted, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. David looked at Tyler with growing horror as understanding dawned. "Videos of what, Tyler?" "Of me," Tyler said quietly. "When I get punished, he watches them sometimes at night." The silence that followed was deafening. Ms. Rivera immediately picked up the phone to call the police. James' attorney stepped away from his client, shock evident on his face. David felt sick. The rabbit hole was deeper and darker than he had imagined. The courthouse was quieter today, with fewer people rushing through the hallways. David sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 4, reviewing his notes one last time. Tyler sat beside him, wearing a borrowed blue button-up shirt that was slightly too large for his small frame. The boy's legs swung nervously, not quite reaching the floor. "Are you ready?" David asked gently. Tyler nodded, though his hands fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. "Will I have to talk to my dad?" "No," David assured him. "You'll just need to answer some questions from the judge. I'll be right there the whole time." Down the hallway, Lisa Wilson spoke quietly with Ms. Rivera. She had arrived early, dressed in a simple blouse and skirt borrowed from her sister. 93 days sober now, her eyes were clear and focused, though her hands trembled slightly. At precisely 11 a.m., the doors to courtroom 4 opened. Judge Williams's clerk, a serious woman with gray-streaked hair, called them in. The courtroom felt massive to Tyler, who stayed close to David as they walked to their seats. James Wilson sat at the opposite table with a different attorney. Mr. Prescott had withdrawn from the case overnight. James wore an expensive suit and a concerned expression that David recognized as carefully practiced. 4 police officers stood at the back of the room, unusual presence for a family court hearing. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Sandra Williams," the clerk announced. Judge Williams entered, her dark robes flowing as she took her seat at the bench. She surveyed the room with experienced eyes, lingering momentarily on Tyler. "We're here regarding the emergency petition filed in the case of Tyler Wilson," she began. "Given the serious nature of the allegations, I've reviewed the preliminary evidence submitted by Mr. Martinez and the report from Child Protective Services." She turned to James Wilson. "Mr. Wilson, the court has also been made aware that police executed a search warrant at your residence this morning. Would your counsel like to address this?" James' new attorney, a nervous-looking young man, stood. "Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. We believe the search was conducted on false pretenses." Judge Williams raised an eyebrow. "The police report indicates they found video recordings consistent with the allegations. Would you care to amend your statement?" James whispered furiously to his attorney, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Your Honor," David interjected, "we'd like to request that Tyler not be present for this discussion of evidence." Judge Williams nodded. "Agreed. Ms. Rivera, would you please take Tyler to the waiting room? We'll call him when needed." After Tyler left, the details became more disturbing. The police had found not only the videos Tyler mentioned but financial records showing payments to shut down previous investigations. James had been systematically documenting his abuse and using his wealth to cover it up. When Tyler returned to testify, the atmosphere in the courtroom had changed. Everyone looked at him differently now, with sadness, with concern, with respect for his courage. Judge Williams spoke to them kindly. Tyler, I just need to ask you a few questions. Are you comfortable with that? Tyler nodded, his eyes finding David for reassurance. Can you tell me what happened when you saw Mr. Martinez at the courthouse yesterday? The judge asked. Tyler's voice was small but steady. I saw him and knew he would help me. Dad was talking to his lawyer, and I just ran. Why did you choose Mr. Martinez? Judge Williams asked gently. Tyler glanced at David. He looked kind, like he would listen. He paused. And he has the same color tie as my teacher, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett always helps kids who are scared. A simple child's logic that had changed everything. Judge Williams's decision was swift and unambiguous. James Wilson was remanded into police custody. Tyler would be placed temporarily with his mother under supervision, with mandatory therapy for both. As they left the courtroom, Tyler reached for David's hand. The simple trust in that gesture made David's throat tighten with emotion. Is it really over? Tyler asked. This part is, David answered honestly. Now the healing begins. The conference room at the district attorney's office was packed with serious faces. David sat between Sarah and Ms. Rivera, facing a table of officials from various departments. Large windows overlooked the city, but no one was admiring the view. District Attorney Eleanor Patel, a sharp-minded woman with 20 years of experience, tapped her pen against a thick file. The Wilson case has exposed significant failures in our child protection system, she said. We need to understand exactly what went wrong. On the wall, a timeline showed Tyler's journey through the system. Red marks highlighted missed opportunities and overlooked warning signs. 3 separate reports were filed about Tyler in the past year, David pointed out. All 3 were closed without proper investigation. A man in a gray suit shifted uncomfortably. He was Thomas Reeves, Director of Child Protective Services. We're severely understaffed, he explained. Our caseworkers handle double the recommended caseload. That doesn't explain falsified home visit reports, Ms. Rivera countered, pushing forward a document. Someone signed off on visits that never happened. The revelation sent murmurs through the room. We've identified the employee responsible, Reeves admitted. James Wilson paid him $5,000 to file positive reports without conducting actual visits. David leaned forward. And Tyler's court-appointed attorney, Ms. Jenkins, barely spoke to him before recommending he stay with his father. A representative from the public defender's office sighed. Ms. Jenkins had 87 active cases last month. The recommended maximum is 30. She had 15 minutes to review Tyler's file before his hearing. Each explanation revealed the system stretched beyond its breaking point, underfunded, overworked, and vulnerable to manipulation by someone with money and influence. As the meeting continued, David received a text from Lisa Wilson. Tyler spoke in therapy today, first time. Doctor says it's progress. A small victory amid the larger battle. David smiled briefly before refocusing on the discussion. What about Judge Morris, who granted initial custody to James despite the mother's concerns about abuse? Sarah asked, referring to the judge who had handled the case before Judge Williams. A court administrator cleared his throat. Judge Morris has connections to the West Side Golf Club, where James Wilson is a member. We're investigating if there was any improper influence. District Attorney Patel stood up, her expression determined. This case isn't just about one child, it's about every child who falls through the cracks. I'm forming a special task force to review all cases handled by the compromised CPS worker and possibly Judge Morris. A reporter named Michael Chen, invited to document the findings, raised his hand. Will this be made public? People need to know. Absolutely, Patel confirmed, with appropriate protections for the children's identities. After the meeting, David walked with Ms. Rivera to the parking lot. Do you think anything will actually change? She asked, her voice tired but hopeful. David thought about Tyler, about the other children still trapped in situations no one was seeing. It has to, he said simply. We can't let another child go through what Tyler did. That evening, David visited Tyler and Lisa at their temporary apartment provided by a support program. The small space was neat and bright with flowers on the table. Tyler was working on a puzzle, his face more relaxed than David had ever seen it. Mr. David. Tyler smiled, running to greet him. I started school today. My teacher is nice. That's great, buddy, David said, genuinely happy to see the change in him. Lisa offered David coffee. The prosecutor says James will likely get 15 years, she said quietly while Tyler returned to his puzzle. They found evidence of abuse going back to other children in other states. David nodded. The system failed Tyler at every turn. We're working to fix it. Because of you, Lisa said. Because you stopped when my son asked for help. David watched Tyler carefully placing puzzle pieces, slowly rebuilding his world piece by piece. Some breaks in the system were being repaired too, though much work remained. For now, that was enough. 6 months had passed since that fateful day in the courthouse hallway. Spring had arrived, bringing warm sunshine and new growth to the city. David parked his car outside a small yellow house with a neat front yard. A bicycle leaned against the porch, and colorful flowers lined the walkway. This was Tyler and Lisa's new home, purchased with help from a victim's assistance program. David grabbed a wrapped package from his passenger seat and walked to the door. Lisa answered his knock, looking healthier than he had ever seen her. 236 days sober now, she wore her achievement with quiet pride. David, come in, she smiled, stepping aside. Tyler's in the backyard. He's been watching the clock all morning waiting for you. The house was modest but warm, with simple furniture and framed photos on the walls. Most showed Tyler in his new life. Playing soccer, at school events, smiling with his mother. The shadows under his eyes were gone. David followed Lisa through the house to the backyard, where Tyler was throwing a ball for a small brown dog. When he spotted David, his face lit up. You came, Tyler called, running over. At 9 years old now, he stood taller, his shoulders straighter, his voice more confident. I promised, didn't I? David replied, handing him the wrapped package. Happy birthday, buddy. Tyler tore open the paper to reveal a telescope. His eyes widened with excitement. Wow, just like the one we saw at the Science Museum. So you can see the stars better, David explained. Your mom mentioned you've been reading about astronomy. The dog bounced around them, barking for attention. Tyler laughed, patting its head. This is Rusty. Mom got him from the shelter last month. Lisa brought lemonade and cookies to a small table on the patio. As they sat together, David noticed a stack of letters bound with ribbon on a shelf inside. What are those? He asked. Lisa followed his gaze. Letters from other families. After the news story about Tyler's case, people started writing. Some shared similar experiences. Others offered support. The investigation into the county's child protection system had indeed made headlines. Michael Chen's series of articles had won a journalism award and prompted new legislation named Tyler's Law to improve oversight of child welfare cases. How's therapy going? David asked Tyler, who was arranging cookies on his plate in a precise pattern. Dr. Melissa says I'm doing really good, Tyler replied. I still have bad dreams sometimes, but not as much. He looked up with serious eyes. She says what happened wasn't my fault. She's absolutely right, David affirmed. Lisa touched her son's shoulder gently. Tyler's school counselor thinks he might be gifted in mathematics. His teacher's giving him special projects. As they talked, David noticed how Tyler now made eye contact, how he laughed easily, how he moved without the constant vigilance of a child expecting harm. The healing was ongoing but undeniable. I have news too, David said. Remember Judge Williams? She's heading the new child advocacy center we've been developing. It opens next month. The center would bring together legal services, therapy, medical care, and support programs in one child-friendly location. It was designed to prevent children from falling through the cracks as Tyler had. Will you still be my lawyer? Tyler asked, suddenly concerned. David smiled. I'll always be here if you need legal help, but I'm hoping you won't need a lawyer much anymore. I'd rather just be your friend. This seemed to satisfy Tyler. He grabbed David's hand. Come see my room. I have a star chart on my ceiling. As David followed the excited boy into the house, Lisa called after them. 5 minutes, then it's time for cake. Later, watching Tyler blow out his birthday candles, David thought about those 4 desperate words that had started everything. Please don't let go. He hadn't let go, and neither had Tyler. Together, they had held on through the darkness until they found the light. For Tyler, it was a new beginning. For David, It was a powerful reminder of why he became an attorney in the first place, not just to navigate laws, but to change lives. 5 years had passed since Tyler first ran to David in that courthouse hallway. The autumn leaves fell gently outside the windows of Westside High School as students filed into the auditorium. Today was career day, and the room buzzed with teenage energy and whispered conversations. David Martinez sat backstage, reviewing his notes one last time. At 47, a few gray hairs now appeared at his temples, but his eyes still held the same determination. He checked his watch. 5 minutes until his presentation. "Nervous?" asked a familiar voice. David looked up to see Tyler Wilson standing in the doorway. At 14, Tyler had grown tall and confident. His sandy brown hair was neatly combed for the occasion, and he wore a button-up shirt that matched the color of his eager eyes. "A little," David admitted with a smile. "Public speaking never gets easier." Tyler grinned. "You'll be great. Everyone's excited to hear from the famous attorney who started the Child Advocacy Center." The center had indeed become David's legacy. What began as a response to Tyler's case had grown into a nationally recognized program. 7 other cities had created similar centers based on David's model. "Famous might be stretching it," David laughed. "How's your mom doing?" "Really good," Tyler replied proudly. 5 years sober next month. And her counseling practice is full. She's helping other parents now. Lisa Wilson had transformed her painful experiences into purpose. After completing recovery, she had gone back to school to become a certified addiction counselor. She now worked with parents fighting to rebuild their lives and families. A teacher poked her head in. "Mr. Martinez, we're ready for you." David stood, straightening his tie. Tyler gave him a quick thumbs up before slipping into the audience to watch. On stage, David faced a sea of teenage faces. He placed his prepared speech on the podium, but then set it aside. "I want to tell you a story," he began, "about 4 words that changed 2 lives forever." He shared Tyler's story with the students, carefully protecting private details while conveying the power of that moment. He explained how one encounter had revealed problems in the system meant to protect children and how it had inspired new solutions. "Sometimes the most important moments in life come unexpectedly," David told them. "When a child reached out for help, I had a choice to make. We all face these choices, to get involved or to walk away." After the presentation, many students approached with questions. One quiet girl waited until the others had gone. "Do you think I could be a lawyer someday?" she asked hesitantly. "Even if my family doesn't have much money." "Absolutely," David assured her, giving her information about the scholarship program his firm had established. Another unexpected legacy of Tyler's case. As David packed up his materials, the school principal approached with Tyler. "Mr. Martinez, I wanted you to see this," the principal said, handing him a paper. "It's Tyler's essay that won the statewide competition last month." The essay was titled, "The Day That Saved Me." David read it with a growing lump in his throat. Tyler had written about their first meeting, about his journey through recovery, and about his plans for the future. The final paragraph read, "Next year, I'll start college to study psychology. Someday, I want to work with children who have experienced trauma. I want to be the person who notices when they're hurting, who listens when they speak, and who takes action when they need help. Just like someone once did for me." Outside in the parking lot, Lisa waited by her car. She waved when she saw David and Tyler walking toward her. "How did it go?" she asked. "David was awesome," Tyler said proudly. Everyone was impressed. Lisa smiled warmly at David. "We're having a small dinner tonight to celebrate Tyler's essay award. Nothing fancy, just family. Would you like to join us?" Family. The word hung in the air with special meaning. What had begun with 4 desperate words in a courthouse hallway had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. "I'd be honored," David replied. As they stood in the school parking lot, David watched Tyler laughing with his mother. The scared little boy who had once begged him not to let go had become a strong young man ready to help others. That was the true legacy, not the centers or programs or laws, but the lives that would be touched by the ripples spreading outward from that one moment of connection, continuing for generations to come.